Hello and welcome. My name is Vineet Malhotra and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories from around the world. Donald Trump says that President Xi's trip to Vietnam is aiming to screw the US. Chinese President Xi Jinping is next heading to Malaysia for the second leg of his East Asia tour, aiming to build relations amid the global trade tensions. And China has ordered a halt on Boeing jet deliveries as the ongoing US trade war continues to escalate. Meanwhile, Trump has offered immediate negotiations with South Korea, Japan and India, according to the South Korean acting president. Well, China has accused the United States National Security Agency of launching advanced cyber attacks during the Asian Winter Games. And China has slammed manipulation and hype over Chinese soldiers captured by Ukraine. Meanwhile, attacks have been reported by both Russia and Ukraine, reportedly leading to the death of an elderly Russian lady in the Kursk region. Egyptian officials have cited a positive turn in negotiations over a Gaza ceasefire despite talks collapsing in Cairo. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says he is deeply alarmed over a Sunday strike on the Al Ahli Arab Hospital in the enclave. Iran has said that military capabilities are red lines in US talks over a potential nuclear deal. A further meeting is scheduled for next Saturday after direct talks in Oman last weekend. The UN has warned that ignoring Sudan war refugees will have catastrophic consequences. This comes ahead of a meeting of diplomats in London later, though representatives from the army and rebel forces will not be present. The Department of Education has frozen funding worth $2.3 billion for Harvard. It comes as the university rejected numerous demands from the Trump administration, which is cracking down on what it says is anti-Semitism on college campuses. All right, starting with the top story, China's President Xi Jinping has called on Vietnam to oppose unilateral bullying and defend global free trade. His remarks came during a visit to Hanoi, part of a tour across Southeast Asia. Xi's message was a direct challenge to the growing trade tensions with the United States. While his visit was planned months ago, it takes on new significance as the US-China trade war intensifies. Last week, US President Donald Trump accused the Chinese leader of trying to screw the US. In meetings with the Vietnamese leaders, Trump also questioned the purpose of Xi's talks in Hanoi, stating it was an attempt to hurt the United States. During the trip, China and Vietnam signed 45 agreements covering everything from supply chains to joint maritime patrols. Xi's message was clear. China aims to stand as a stable force in a world divided by trade wars. Ross Feingold, political risk analyst, is joining us on the broadcast to talk more about this. Ross, always a pleasure to have you. Well, this seems to be escalating to a point where it is going to be pinching the Americans as well. You know, the Boeing orders that have been cancelled at this point in time are worth billions of dollars, and this is obviously going to put a jolt in the trade as well as you know, the supply chains that both these countries have so very much enjoyed over the last few decades.
Certainly, Vietnam is looking for what comes next. Do they stand with the United States, or do they stand with China, or they look to be in the middle? For the most part, they look to be in the middle. So we often think of Vietnam as having the sovereignty disputes in the South China Sea, and that's a very it's a big issue with a lot of high tensions between Vietnam and China over disputed sovereignty in the South China Sea. But at the same time, we also see a high willingness of Vietnam to engage with China, to trade with China, to welcome Chinese investment in Vietnam. And now China has the added advantage of saying we're the country promoting the flow of people, the flow of capital, and the flow of goods. So it's a very interesting time for Xi Jinping to be visiting Vietnam. But we see by Vietnam's actions, and if actions speak louder than words, then Vietnam is still seeking to have a strong relationship with China, notwithstanding the sovereignty disputes.
Where do you think this is leading to? Obviously now Donald Trump is not only talking about tariffs He's not talking about percentages, he's directly targeting Xi Jinping. This is more so becoming personal in nature. How do you think this is likely to play out? Because there is a certain point beyond which you should not speculate about the other country or party. In fact, this has gone beyond that point.
We'll see how this affects other issues that are on the U.S.-China bilateral agenda. You have to keep in mind that bilateral agenda is extraordinarily lengthy, even though between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, that agenda has and will undergo some change. The most obvious example is when the Biden administration engaged with China, when Biden and Xi Jinping either met or had a teleconference or video conference. One issue that was important to the Biden administration was climate change. That's not going to be an important issue to the Trump administration, but cooperation on ending the shipment of fentanyl precursors to Mexico was an important issue for the Biden administration, as it is for the Trump administration. So there are a number of issues that China will probably not be eager to talk to the United States about as long as there are tensions in the trade relationship. So it's kind of hard to compartmentalize the trade issues from all those many other issues that are on the bilateral agenda. And perhaps that's why there's been a delay in having a Xi-Trump phone call or potentially setting up a visit by one or the other to the other's country.
Ross, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much. Moving on, Chinese security officials said on Tuesday that they had implicated 3 U.S. secret agents in cyber attacks during February's Asian Winter Games in northeastern city of Harbin. Harbin police released a statement naming the individuals as Catherine A. Wilson, Robert J. Snelling and Stephen W. Johnson, and stating that they worked in the NSA's Office of Tailored Access Operations, which is an intelligence gathering unit on cyber warfare. Reports have also linked University of California and Virginia Tech University to these attacks. The attacks allegedly targeted the event's information release and entry-exit management system, as well as card payments and local infrastructure between January 26th and the 14th of February. China's foreign ministry on Tuesday condemned what it called malicious cyber behavior and said it had expressed its concerns to the US in various ways. Here's what Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian had to say.
9届亚冬会期间，美国政府针对赛事的信息系统和黑龙江省内的关键信息基础设施开展了网络攻击，对中国关键信息的基础设施、国防、金融、社会、生产以及公民的个人信息安全造成了严重危害，性质十分恶劣。中方谴责美国政府的上述恶意网络行为。
And according to reports, the U.S. Embassy in Beijing has not responded to a request for comment. The Harbin police statement also accused the NSA agents of targeting Chinese companies, including Huawei, which has faced U.S. sanctions since 2019 over national security concerns. Officials said they would reward any person who could provide clues about the 3 individuals and cooperate with public security organizations in arresting them. Ross Feingold is still with us on the broadcast, and Ross, it seems that it's not only trade but also security that both these countries are locking horns over.
Certainly the two sides spy on each other. Frankly, this would come as no surprise to anyone. Of course, the United States is more frequent in accusing China of engaging in hacking, whether that's into government or into the private sector for purposes of stealing intellectual property or trade secrets. Neither side is going to admit that they engage in these kinds of activities, but it is a bit rare, I would say, for the Chinese side to accuse the US side of this and also to specifically name the alleged hackers. We don't see that as often from the Chinese side as we see, for example, in the United States, the Department of Justice announcing the names of hackers or organizations, companies that are wanted on criminal charges in the United States. So what China did is a bit unusual.
Right. Ross, appreciate you joining us. Thank you once again for those inputs. Moving on, senior officials are gathering in London aiming to chart a pathway to peace for Sudan on the second anniversary of its brutal civil conflict, but without the presence of the warring parties. Dubbed the Forgotten War, the conflict which erupted on the 15th of April 2023 between Sudan's regular army and the paramilitary rapid support forces in a power struggle between rival generals has created what the United Nations describes as the world's worst hunger and displacement crisis. The UN chief has said in a statement that ignoring Sudan war refugees will have catastrophic consequences. Additionally, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi also stressed on how important it is to address this crisis, and the world must take every step to end it. There are also increasing fears that the tensions will spill over Sudan's borders and stir further instability in the impoverished Horn of Africa region. More than 13 million people have been uprooted and tens of thousands have been killed, with both sides accused by the United States of committing atrocities. Meanwhile, the United Nations has said that between 60,000 and 80,000 households, or up to 400,000 people, have been displaced from Sudan's Zamzam camp in North Darfur after it was taken over by the Rapid Support Forces. Let us listen into what the UNHCR Regional Director for West and Central Africa had to say.
Alors, à la date d'aujourd'hui, ce qu'on a comme information, c'est qu'à peu près, la crise, le conflit, la guerre a déplacé près de 13 millions de Soudanais, que ce soit à l'intérieur ou à l'extérieur du pays.
Mr. Charles Sinkala, International Relation Consultant, is joining us on the broadcast to talk more about this. Charles, appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. Well, this is being dubbed as a war which is creating ripples across Africa, and yet it is underreported, it is underestimated. What do you think would be the implications if the international community continues to ignore this?
I think it is being legitimized that war can continue, and many people has been displaced. Nearly 60,000 or 60% rather of Sudanese people has been displaced because this war has been going on for more than 2 years. And I think the ones who has created the war, they actually are happy that their progress in terms of the agenda that they have put, or whatever their interest is in that country, has actually been flourished, because there's no seriousness in terms of the regional organizations such as AU and as well as the international community, the United Nations Security Council, to put an end to the conflicts between which are within the civil country of Sudan.
Right. Well, you know, there is obviously this huge gap that is emerging at this point in time, and the fallout in terms of human rights is also something which is being reported across international dailies. But do you think that the Americans also need to have a more proactive role in making sure that these hostilities are settled down?
I think it's not only the United States of America government and Congress that they have to take very drastic steps in terms of ending the conflicts which are happening within the continent of Africa and around the world. It's the collective responsibility for all the heads of states and government, and as well as monarchs, to sit and look at these conflicts, that they are actually violating the international protocol for human rights, as many people has been displaced. Yes, we have Sudan and South Sudan that has been war for more than 2 years. I think what is happening in Sudan, it hasn't happened anywhere in the last 40 years, as people are being displaced and killed at will without any recourse of government or AU or any other organization to look after their security.
Right, and do you think the United Nations also needs to do more when it comes to the condition of these refugees? 60,000 households, 400,000 people displaced at this point in time without any food or water. What more can the UN do?
I think the United Nations is the largest humanitarian organization, which also consists of the World Health Organization. It also consists of the Security Council that looks at peace and security within the region and outside the continent. And I think it is the largest organization where there's more than 190 member states that contributes to the United Nations. And it's incumbent up to it to ensure that certain territories are free from conflict, and as well as those other third parties who are involved, who are escalating and escalating military support to these nations, stop to do so, and they might give them strict sanctions, not only continental sanctions like what they have done in certain countries such as Zimbabwe, but would like individuals who perpetrate to cause these humanitarian crises, that they may be brought to any tribunal or international criminal court to answer charges in terms of abuse to human lives.
Charles, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. Moving on to our next important story, Harvard University is pushing back against demands from the Trump administration, rejecting what it calls government overreach that would compromise its independence. The Trump administration has since frozen $2.3 billion in federal funding to the school. The move comes after the Education Department said it was reviewing a total of $9 billion in federal contracts and grants awarded to Harvard. And according to analysts, the review is part of a broader crackdown by the administration, which says universities have failed to address rising anti-Semitism on campuses, especially after recent pro-Palestinian protests. A Department of Education task force on anti-Semitism accused Harvard of having a troubling entitlement mindset, suggesting the university expects federal funding without properly upholding civil rights laws. In yesterday's letter, Harvard President Alan Garber said that the administration's demands would allow the government to control the Harvard community and threaten the university's role as a private institution. He said no government should decide what private universities teach, who they hire, or what they research. The White House defended the funding freeze, with spokesman Harrison Fields saying President Trump is working to make higher education great again by ensuring taxpayer money does not support what it calls racially motivated discrimination or violence. In response to the potential financial shortfall, Harvard is reportedly planning to borrow $750 million from Wall Street. And moving on, Egypt's top media official says there has been a positive turn in ceasefire hostage deal talks between Israel and Hamas as mediated discussions with Qatar continue. Hamas officials have also said that the group is likely to respond to Israel's truce proposal within 48 hours. Meanwhile, Gaza's last fully operational hospital, Al Ahli Al Arab, was destroyed in an Israeli airstrike. The IDF said that the site was used by Hamas as a command center. Footage showed flames and patients fleeing. One injured child died during evacuation, and the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem confirmed this. Let's listen in to what some of the victims had to say.
ولسه دوب روح ملوش 10 دقايق اجته حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل هالصاروخ وفتتهم كلياتهم. هو استشهد وابنه مالك استشهد ومرته صاوبت وبنته صاوبت وابنه الله يشفيه يا رب. راحت عين. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. ايش بقى يساوي؟ بقى يبيع متس شراب الثلج. ايش بقى يساوي؟ لا بقى يصنع صواريخ ولا بقى يصنع بواريد ولا شيء. وايش ذنب الطفل المالك هذا؟ عاش انولد في الحرب ومات في الحرب، ما شافش يوم حلو من حياته.
كل يوم مجازر، كل يوم شهداء، مش عقد ابني ولا عقد ابن ابني، كل يوم اطفال بكم. ايش ذنبه النايم الطفل جنب ابوه؟ هاي الطفل هذا انولد في الحرب؟ انولد في الحرب ومات في الحرب، سنه 4 شهور عمره. سنه 4 شهور عمره. ايش ذنب؟
Well, the World Health Organization called the strike a violation of international law, and UN Chief Antonio Guterres and UK officials echoed the condemnation, saying attacks on medical sites must stop. The hospital had been serving as a critical facility after the destruction of other hospitals in Gaza. Over 50,000 people have died in Gaza since October, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. And the spokesperson for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Ali Mohammad Naini, has said that the country's national security and defense and military power are amongst the red lines which cannot be discussed or negotiated under any circumstances. This comes after the United States and Iran resumed a second round of nuclear talks in Muscat, Oman. And according to Iranian state media on Monday, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghei confirmed the meetings are ongoing, following what both sides described as positive and constructive initial discussions over the weekend. And when asked if US options for a response include a military strike on Tehran's nuclear facilities, Trump said, "Of course it does." Trump said the Iranians need to move fast to avoid a harsh response because they're fairly close to developing a nuclear weapon. Here's what President Trump had to say.
I want them to be a rich, great nation. The only thing is, one thing, simple. It's really simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon. And they got to go fast because they're fairly close to having one. And they're not going to have one. And if we have to do something very harsh, we'll do it. And I'm not doing it for us, I'm doing it for the world. And these are radicalized people, and they cannot have a nuclear weapon.
And Saturday's high-level talks marked a rare moment of direct engagement between the two adversaries, with the U.S. delegation led by President Trump's Middle East envoy and Iran represented by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Both nations have agreed to continue negotiations later this week, though details remain tightly under wraps. Oman has long served as a diplomatic bridge between Tehran and the West, hosting back-channel efforts that laid the groundwork for previous nuclear agreements as well. Despite the stakes, both sides appear committed to keeping the door open for now. And in a sweeping crackdown on organized crime, Turkey's interior minister announced the arrest of over 230 suspects, most of them within Turkey. At a press conference earlier today, Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya revealed that 234 high-level members of a criminal organization were taken into custody, 225 in Turkey and 9 abroad. The coordinated raids took place simultaneously across 5 countries: the Netherlands, Germany, Spain, Belgium and Turkey. Authorities also collaborated with several other nations, including France and the UK, ahead of the operation. Officials seized an astonishing 21.2 tons of drugs during these busts. The suspects face a range of serious charges, including drug trafficking and money laundering, and Minister Yerlikaya called it a massive international network, underlining the scale and reach of the operation. And at least 3 police officers were killed and 16 others injured when a roadside bomb struck their bus in Pakistan's Balochistan province on Tuesday. The vehicle carrying 40 officers was targeted in the Mustang district, about 40 kilometers south of Quetta. It was a roadside IED blast, said a local official, Raja Mohammad Akram. 2 of the injured are in critical condition, and officials have confirmed this. No group has claimed responsibility, but the Baloch Liberation Army, which frequently targets security forces, is suspected. The region has seen escalating violence in recent years amid a long-running separatist insurgency. Armed groups have killed more than 200 people this year alone in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news and updates from around the world. Thank you for watching.